Respected, there comes a moment in life when silence speaks louder than words, when your absence becomes the message they can no longer ignore. And in that moment, when the avoidant feels you've truly moved on, something shifts deep within them, not because they suddenly understand love, but because they can no longer escape themselves. You see, people who avoid emotional depth are not empty, they are overwhelmed. They build walls, not to hurt others, but to protect wounds they never learned to heal. And when you were there, offering presence, patience, and understanding, they took it for granted, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. But now you've stepped back. Now you've chosen yourself. Now your energy no longer chases, no longer waits, no longer begs. And this is where their world begins to shake. Because the avoidant thrives in distance, but not in abandonment. They are comfortable when they control the space between you. But when that control is gone, when you reclaim your power, they are left facing a truth they tried to escape. You were never the problem. Your presence was the mirror. And now that mirror is gone. At first, they will pretend not to care. They will distract themselves, immerse in noise, surround themselves with temporary comforts. But silence has a way of returning. And when it does, it whispers your name in ways they cannot ignore. They will begin to notice your absence in the smallest things, the conversations that no longer happen, the warmth that no longer exists, the energy that once felt safe, now replaced with emptiness. And this is where confusion begins, because they thought distance would bring relief, but instead it brings realization. Realization that you were not asking for too much. You were asking for truth. You were asking for presence. You were asking for connection. And they were not ready. So what do next? They observe silently, carefully, from a distance. They watch your growth. They notice your strength. They see you becoming everything they were afraid to face within themselves. And your peace, your glow, your detachment, it unsettles them because now you are no longer chasing. You are no longer available in the way you once were. You have become whole without them. And that is their greatest fear. So they may reach out, but not always directly. A message that seems casual, but carries hidden emotion, a reaction to your presence, a sudden curiosity about your life. They may test the waters, not because they have changed, but because they feel the shift. And here is where wisdom must guide you, because not every return is a transformation. Sometimes it is simply discomfort speaking. Understand this deeply. Just because someone feels your absence does not mean they are ready for your presence. Growth is not proven by words, but by consistent action. Change is not declared, it is demonstrated. And if they return without healing, without awareness, without accountability, then they are not coming back for you. They are coming back for the comfort they lost. You must not confuse their reaction with their evolution, because your journey was never about making them understand. It was about you remembering your worth. There is a divine order in all things. When you release what no longer aligns with your soul, you create space for something greater. And sometimes that greater is not another person, but a deeper connection with yourself, a peace that cannot be disturbed, a strength that does not seek validation, a love that begins within. And when you reach that state, something powerful happens. You stop waiting, you stop wondering, you stop needing closure from those who were never ready to give it, because you become the closure. So if they come back, observe, don't react. Listen, but don't lose yourself. Stand firm in the truth you have discovered. You are not the same person who once tolerated confusion. You are not the same soul who once accepted half-hearted presence. You have grown, you have awakened, you have chosen yourself. And that choice, that sacred, powerful decision is what changed everything. Let them feel your absence. Let them face their reflections. Let them learn what they once ignored. But you keep moving forward, because what is meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to receive it. And remember this always: when someone fears losing you, it does not mean they value you. But when you no longer fear losing them, that is when you finally value yourself. The moment an avoidant senses emotional detachment or the loss of control, something deep inside them becomes unsettled. It is not always loud or obvious on the surface, but internally, it creates a quiet storm. For a long time, they felt safe operating within a certain emotional distance, close enough to receive attention, but far enough to avoid true vulnerability. That space gave them control. It allowed them to manage how much they gave, how much they felt, and how much they risked. But when you begin to withdraw that energy, when your presence is no longer constant or predictable, it disrupts the balance they had grown comfortable with. Control, for the avoidant, is not about power over you. It is about protection from themselves. They fear the depth of emotions they cannot regulate, the attachment they cannot fully understand, and the vulnerability that makes them feel exposed. So when they feel you pulling away, it is not just about losing you. It is about losing the system they created to feel safe, and that is what triggers them. At first, they may not even recognize what they are feeling. It can come out as irritation, confusion, or even indifference. They might tell themselves that it does not matter, that they are better off alone, that this distance is what they wanted all along. But beneath those surface thoughts lies something much deeper, a discomfort they cannot easily escape, because now the dynamic has changed. You are no longer the one reaching out, no longer the one trying to close the gap. And in that shift, they are forced into a position they are not used to, the one who feels the absence. This is where their inner conflict begins. Part of them wants to retreat further, to protect themselves from feeling anything at all. But another part of them becomes hyper-aware of what is missing. They start to notice the silence where your voice once was, the absence of your attention, the space you used to fill so effortlessly. And this awareness becomes triggering because it forces them to confront something they have long avoided, the reality of emotional connection. For someone who has spent so much time avoiding vulnerability, this realization can feel overwhelming. It is not just about missing you. It is about realizing that your presence meant more than they allowed themselves to admit. And that realization shakes the foundation of their emotional defenses. They may feel an urge to regain control, to reestablish the dynamic that once felt safe, not necessarily because they are ready to open their heart, but because they are uncomfortable with the unfamiliar feeling of losing something they once had access to. This is why their behavior can seem confusing. They might come closer, then pull away again. They might show signs of interest, only to disappear once more. It is not a game in the way it appears. It is a reflection of their internal struggle. They are battling between the desire to reconnect and the fear or what that connection requires from them. And in the midst of all this, there is a deeper truth unfolding, one that does not belong to them but to you. Their trigger is not a sign that you should return, chase, or prove your worth again. It is simply evidence that your absence has shifted something within them. But your journey is no longer about managing their emotions or restoring their comfort. It is about standing firm in your own growth, understanding that their reaction is part of their process, not your responsibility. When you begin to move on, something subtle yet powerful shifts in the dynamic, and for the avoidant, this shift feels deeply unsettling. For a long time, the balance of connection existed on their terms: when to come close, when to pull away, when to engage, and when to disappear. This unspoken control allowed them to feel safe because it kept emotional intensity at a distance. But the moment you stop participating in that pattern, the entire structure begins to collapse. Moving on is not always loud or dramatic. It often happens quietly through your detachment, your silence, your decision to no longer invest where there is no consistency. And it is this quiet transformation that disrupts the avoidant the most. Because now the control they once held is no longer theirs. You are no longer waiting, no longer adjusting yourself to fit their comfort zone, no longer chasing clarity from someone who offered confusion. And in that shift, the power dynamic reverses. For the avoidant, this reversal creates an internal conflict they are not prepared to face. On one side, there is their progeny instinct to withdraw, to convince themselves that independence is strength and distance is safety. But on the other side, there is a growing awareness that they are no longer the one being pursued. And that awareness brings discomfort because it forces them into a role they have avoided: the one who feels uncertain, the one who risks being rejected, the one who no longer controls the outcome. This is where their mind begins to question everything. They may start wondering why you stopped reaching out, why your energy feels different, why the connection no longer revolves around their pace. And even if they do not fully understand it, they feel it. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed what you tolerate. The loss of control is not just about losing influence over you. It is about losing the emotional safety net they unknowingly relied on. Your consistency, your patience, your willingness to stay even when things were unclear, all of that gave them a sense of stability without requiring them to fully show up. But now, that safety net is gone, and in its place is uncertainty. This uncertainty is what creates tension within them. They may feel an urge to regain balance, to restore the connection in a way that feels familiar, but at the same time, they are confronted with the reality that things are no longer the same. You are no longer responding in predictable ways. You are no longer available in the way they once took for granted. And that forces them to confront a difficult truth. They are no longer in control of how this story unfolds. And this is where growth begins to reveal itself, not necessarily within them, but within you. Because the shift in power is not about dominance or winning. It is about alignment. It is about you stepping into a space where your energy is no longer dictated by someone else's inability to meet you fully. The avoidant may feel the shift. They may react to it. They may even try to navigate it in their own way. But your role is no longer to manage their comfort or restore their sense of control. Your role is to remain grounded in the truth you have discovered, that real connection does not require you to lose yourself, and real power comes from choosing peace over uncertainty. And as you continue to move forward, what once felt like a loss begins to reveal itself as a return to your self-worth, your clarity, and your inner stability. When the avoidance senses your distance, and realizes that your presence is no longer guaranteed. They rarely rush in with direct vulnerability. Instead, they move in subtle, almost unnoticeable ways. Their approach is not loud or obvious. It is cautious, indirect, and often layered with ambiguity. This is because, deep down, they are still protecting themselves from exposure even while feeling the pull toward you. Rather than openly expressing their emotions, they begin by observing. They watch from a distance, trying to understand where you stand without putting themselves at risk. This observation can take many forms: checking your activity, paying attention to changes in your behavior, or becoming quietly aware of your growth. They are searching for signs, trying to measure whether there is still a doorway open for them, but without stepping fully into it. And when they do make a move, it often comes disguised as something casual, a simple message, a reaction, a brief check-in that seems harmless on the surface. But behind that small action is a deeper intention. They are testing the emotional temperature. They want to see how you respond, how accessible you still are, and whether the connection can be reactivated without requiring them to fully confront their feelings. This indirect re-entry is not necessarily manipulation. It is a reflection of their internal limitations. They do not know how to approach connection in a direct, emotionally transparent way, especially after distance has already been created. So instead of saying, "I miss you," they might ask something neutral. Instead of admitting they feel your absence, they might act as if nothing ever changed. It is their way of bridging the gap without exposing their vulnerability all at once. But this is where confusion often arises for you, because these small gestures can feel meaningful, even hopeful. You may wonder if they have changed, if they are ready, if this is the beginning of something more stable. Yet, it is important to understand that indirect effort does not always equal emotional readiness. Sometimes it simply reflects curiosity, discomfort, or a temporary desire to reconnect with what once felt familiar. Their behavior can become a pattern of reaching out and then pulling back again. They might initiate contact, feel the emotional closeness returning, and then retreat once it begins to feel too real. This push and pull dynamic is not random. It is driven by their internal conflict between wanting connection and fearing it at the same time. And in this space, clarity becomes your responsibility, not theirs. You must learn to see beyond the surface of their actions and recognize the intention behind them. Are they showing consistency? Are they taking accountability? Are they moving toward deeper understanding, or simply circling around the connection without real growth? These are the questions that matter, not the temporary comfort of their presence. Because indirect communication can easily keep you emotionally engaged without offering real progress. It can pull you back into old patterns where you begin to interpret signals, wait for meaning, and invest energy into uncertainty once again. But your growth asks something different of you. It asks you to respond with awareness, not emotion. To observe just as they are observing. To remain grounded in your self-worth rather than getting lost in their subtle gestures. If they troll, wish to return, they will have to move beyond hints and into honesty, beyond observation and into action. Because real connection cannot survive on indirect effort alone. It requires clarity, courage, and emotional presence. And until that is shown, their quiet re-entry is not a sign to go back. It is a moment for you to stand still, remain centered, and choose not to abandon the progress you fought so hard to build. When emotions are consistently suppressed rather than understood, they do not disappear. They transform. They build beneath the surface, quietly shaping behavior in ways that even the avoidant may not fully recognize. This is why their actions can often seem unpredictable, inconsistent, and confusing. It is not because they are intentionally trying to create instability, but because they are disconnected from the very emotions guiding their responses. An avoidant learns early on, consciously or unconsciously, that expressing deep feelings can lead to discomfort, rejection, or loss of control. So instead of processing emotions in a healthy way, they push them down. They distract themselves, rationalize them, or simply ignore them all altogether. But emotions are not meant to be buried. They are meant to be acknowledged. And when they are not, they begin to leak out through behavior. This is where the hot and cold pattern begins to take form. There are moments when they feel safe enough, open enough, or emotionally stirred enough to move closer. In those moments, they may appear engaged, attentive, even deeply connected. They might communicate more, show interest, and give glimpses of the emotional depth they usually keep hidden. And in those moments, it can feel real, because it is. The connection is genuine, but it is not yet stable, because just as quickly as they move closer, something inside them gets triggered. It could be the intensity of the calm, situation, the fear of losing independence, or the unfamiliar weight of vulnerability. Whatever the cause, it creates discomfort. And since they are not equipped to sit with that discomfort and understand it, their instinct is to retreat, to pull away, to create distance once again. And so the cycle continues. They come close, then disappear. They open up, then shut down. They give warmth, then become distant. To you, it may feel like inconsistent or mixedness, but from within them, it feels like survival. They are constantly trying to regulate an internal state they do not fully understand. When they feel too little, they move closer to feel something. When they feel too much, they move away to regain control. This emotional imbalance creates unpredictability, not only for you, but for them as well. They may not even realize why their feelings shift so quickly. One day they may feel certain about the connection, and the next day they may feel the urge to escape it. It is not a calculated decision. It is a reaction to emotions they have not learned to process. And this is where many people become trapped, trying to make sense of behavior that is rooted in unresolved inner conflict. You may begin to question yourself. You may wonder what changed. You may try to adjust your actions to maintain the moments when they are warm. But the truth is, their inconsistency is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their internal struggle. No amount of understanding, patience, or effort on your part can stabilize someone who has not yet learned to face their own emotions, because stability does not come from external reassurance. It comes from internal awareness. And this is where your power lies, not in trying to decode their behavior, but in recognizing its pattern, not in chasing their moments of closeness, but in valuing consistency over intensity. Not I, and holding on to who they are at their best, but in accepting who they show themselves to be over time. Because real connection does not leave you in a constant state of uncertainty. It does not rise and fall based on someone else's emotional avoidance. It is steady, present, and grounded in mutual understanding. So when you encounter this hot and cold dynamic, see it clearly, not as a mystery to solve, but as a signal to honor your own need for stability. When you begin to grow, truly grow, you do more than just change your habits or your mindset. You shift your energy, your standards, your sense of self. And this transformation does something powerful. It becomes a mirror for anyone who once had access to you especially the avoidant. Because your growth is not just about becoming better, it is about becoming clearer. Clearer about what you deserve, what you accept, and what you will no longer tolerate. For the avoidant, this clarity can feel confronting. When you are still trying, still reaching, still adjusting yourself to maintain the connection, they never had to fully face their own limitations. Your presence made it easy for them to remain in their comfort zone. You carried the emotional weight. You initiated the understanding. You created the space for connection. And because of that, they could stay where they were, unmoved, unchallenged, and emotionally distant. But when you begin to grow, that dynamic disappears. You stop overextending. You stop explaining your worth. You stop waiting for someone to meet you halfway. And in doing so, you remove the cushion that once protected them from their own reflection. Now, when they look at you, they no longer see the version of you who tolerated inconsistency. They see someone grounded, someone evolving, someone who has stepped into a deeper sense of self-respect. And that version of you forces them to confront a quiet but powerful question within themselves. Why couldn't I show up like this? This question does not always come in words, but it exists as a feeling, an unease, a tension, a subtle discomfort they cannot easily explain. Because your growth highlights the very areas they have been avoiding within themselves. Your emotional strength exposes their emotional resistance. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your peace exposes their internal chaos. And this is what makes your transformation so impactful. Not because you are trying to prove something to them, but because you are no longer trying to prove anything at all. For someone who avoids introspection, being faced with this kind of contrast can be overwhelming. It challenges their identity, their coping mechanisms, and the narratives they have built to justify their distance. They may begin to realize that what they once labeled as freedom was actually fear, that what they called independence was, in many ways, avoidance of vulnerability. But awareness is not always comfortable. In fact, it can be deeply unsettling, because once they see the truth, they can no longer unsee it. And yet, seeing it does not automatically mean they are ready to change. Growth requires effort, honesty, and the willingness to sit with discomfort, things they may still struggle with. So their response to your growth can vary. They may feel drawn to you, inspired by the person you are becoming. They may feel intimidated, unsure if they can meet you at that level. Or they may withdraw even further, because facing their own reflection feels too heavy. But regardless of their reaction, one thing remains certain: your growth has shifted the entire dynamic. You are no longer operating from a place of seeking validation. You are no longer trying to earn love by overgiving. You are no longer dimming yourself to make someone else comfortable. And that is your power. Because in becoming more aligned with yourself, you naturally create distance from anything that does not align with you. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of clarity. So if they feel challenged by your growth, understand this: it is not your responsibility to shrink so they can feel comfortable again. It is not your role to guide them into awareness or carry them through their own awakening. Your journey is to continue evolving, to continue choosing yourself, and to trust that the right connections will rise to meet you, not resist you. And sometimes the greatest impact you have on someone is not in what you say to them, but in who you become without them. There comes a point in your journey where everything becomes clear, not because the other person finally explained themselves, not because you received the closure you once waited for, but because you reached a level of understanding within yourself that no longer depends on their behavior. And in that space, you begin to realize a powerful truth. Your strength does not come from how someone else feels about you, but from how firmly you stand in your own self-worth, regardless of what they do next. When the avoidant begins to react, whether through subtle messages, sudden curiosity, or inconsistent attempts to reconnect, it can stir something within you. Old emotions may rise, memories may resurface, and a part of you may feel tempted to respond in the way you once did. To engage, to explain, to open the door again, in hopes that this time will be different. But this is where your true power is tested. Because growth is not just about moving forward when it is easy. It is about remaining grounded when the past tries to pull you back in. The avoidance delayed awakening can feel convincing. It may seem like they are finally realizing your value, finally seeing what they lost, finally trying to come closer. And while that may hold some truth, it does not automatically mean they are ready to meet you in the way you deserve. Awareness is only the first step. Transformation requires consistency, accountability, and a willingness to change patterns, not just revisit connections. This is why your power lies not in reacting to their return, but in observing it with clarity. You are no longer in a place where you need to prove your worth or earn their consistency. You have already done that work within yourself. You have already faced the discomfort of letting go, the silence of absence, the strength it takes to choose yourself over familiarity. And that journey has shaped you into someone who understands that self-worth is not something to be negotiated. It is something to be protected. So when they show up again, you do not respond from emotion. You respond from alignment. You ask yourself, does this align with the P so I have built? Does this reflect the consistency I now require? Does this honor the version of me I have become? And if the answer is unclear, you do not rush to fill the gap. You allow time to reveal truth, because you understand now that real change is not proven in moments. It is proven in patterns. There is a quiet confidence that comes with this level of awareness. You no longer feel the urgency to hold on, to fix, or to make things work at any cost. Instead, you become selective, intentional, grounded. You begin to value stability over intensity, clarity over confusion, and peace over temporary emotional highs. And this is what sets you free, because you are no longer controlled by their presence or their absence. You are no longer affected by their inconsistency or their uncertainty. You have stepped into a space where your emotional state is no longer tied to someone else's ability to show up. Let them come, let them go, let them feel what they feel. But you remain steady, not because you do not care, but because you care about yourself enough to not lose your balance again. This is not about closing your heart. It is about protecting it with wisdom. It is about understanding that love in its truest form does not require you to abandon yourself. And anyone who cannot meet you in that truth is not someone you need to chase. They are someone you need to release. So stand firm in who you have become, because the greatest transformation is not that they finally see your worth. It is that you no longer need them to.